Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm the GM Philosopher. Welcome back to GM Philosophy in the Morning. And today we're talking about something maybe a little bit interesting and not so expected for a D&D gaming channel, and that is D&D and TTRPGs and the role they play in your life as you get older and how they change as you age, okay? And I mean, like, as a gamer, as a GM especially, the role that these games play in our lives as we age. Now, when I was younger, I started playing TTRPGs when I was about 15 years old. I wasn't super serious about the hobby, but I did really love it. I was not good at it. I struggled to find people to game with. And as a general rule, it just wasn't a very high priority. And it was just a fun thing I did sometimes when I felt like it, and mostly it consisted of running one shots. Fast forward a bit to my early 20s. I had played a handful of relatively successful TTRPG games, but nothing really super awesome. And I was newly married, and I was making new friendships, entering a new phase of life. And I started taking TTRPGs a little bit more seriously as something fun that could be done at home and with my wife, of course. And so we, something we could do together. Now, one interesting difference that existed between younger me and older me, when I say older me, as I meant like 15-year-old versus the 21-year-old me. One thing that was very different about my approach to these games was that when I was young, 15 years old, 16, 17, I had very little care for getting better at the hobby. I had very little care for getting better at running games. Mostly, I would just kind of run games I thought were fun or cool. Generally, they had a lot of railroading and they were not well done at all. Players would get frustrated with me and would tend to quit games. Either they would not continue for campaigns, or once we played once, they wouldn't play again. And I had this kind of like bad attitude about it. I had this attitude of like, wow, these people, they suck. They don't want to do this fun thing. Not realizing that I was really a source of the problem and really kind of a designer of my own destruction where it came to the games. And then when I got a little older, I started to get a little wiser, 2021. Not much, but a little bit. And where it came to games, I got a little bit wiser in the sense that I realized, if I want to get better at this, I should probably learn how to fix the problems I'm having, learn to identify them, and then learn how to fix them. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up trying to figure out why I was having the trouble I was having, getting people to continue playing with me, and why people were not telling me, oh, that was so fun. Why instead they were kind of just like either actually high key mad at me or at the very least kind of were just in a hurry to bounce. And so I had some theories, and I ended up trying to run some games with a couple friends, kind of like newer friends. And I tried running these games with them. And what ended up happening was I started figuring it out. I started getting better at it. And I thought to myself, the truth is that I'm doing a lot of things wrong. And if I want to be more successful at running TTRPGs, I really need to pay attention to the experience for the players. And I really need to back engineer what's going right. I need to figure out what's going wrong. I have to fix the things that are going wrong. And let's be honest, I'm not good enough to run campaigns. I'm going to try to run one shots, and that's what I'm going to focus on. And so I did that for a while. I was running Star Wars one shots mostly. And I ran I can't remember, maybe 5, 6, 7 of these. And after every session, I would really think about it. I'd be like, okay, what went well? What parts of it seemed to go really well? What parts of it did the players seem to really like? And anyway, I was old enough and I had enough experience at this point to kind of realize that I didn't know what I didn't know and to try to discover how to improve at the craft. Because GMing, dungeon mastering, game mastering, running games is a craft and it is a skill. Being a player, there is some skill to that as well. Absolutely. And you can be an amazing player, or you can be kind of an annoying player that no one wants to play with because you are so bad at it. But to GM is a different type of skill set than being a player. And so I was trying to learn that skill set. And I remember that somewhere around, I think 24 years of age or so, if I'm remembering correctly, and this would have been when my first kid was kind of reaching, I think, close to toddler age, if I'm not mistaken. I think I could be a little off on my time, but anyway. I got to a point where I ran the most successful one shot that I had ever run. And what ended up happening was two of the players who were playing said basically, this was so much fun. We don't really want to stop. Could we continue it? Like next time, instead of starting a new one shot, could we just continue this one? And so what we ended up doing was not necessarily continuing that one per se, but we did end up starting a new game. And this game, the plan was to make it a campaign, to make it longer. So this was kind of like I had started trying to run campaigns, failed miserably. Now coming back in my younger 20s, after practicing one shots for a while, I had this thought I could run campaigns now. And I felt like I had a much better idea of how to make the games fun for everybody. And at this point, I was starting to realize something. I was starting to realize, and this is again, I attribute this to getting older and wiser, and also the changing role that TTRPGs played in my life at this time. So I started to realize that I could make the games fun for the players, and that I could focus on that, and that would make my games go better. So I learned not to focus on trying to drive a specific narrative, hence railroading. I learned to let the players tell the story, and then just to put challenges into the game in front of them and to have, some things going on around them. I learned the value of really important NPCs who the players develop an emotional connection with. This became a big challenge and a great rewarding experience. I feel like I really got better at that during this phase of my life. But also in my life, I was in a sense where TTRPGs were not so much a backseat hobby for me anymore. Before, it was like I did them sometimes, but usually what I would do is I'd go play sports with my friends, or I'd play video games or something like that. TTRPGs definitely moved up in terms of ranking, in terms of like how important they were to me in my life. And the reason for this partly was because my wife and I at the time, we were young parents, did not have much money, lived basically a life paycheck to paycheck, had very little money to go out and do things, and also really no babysitter, couldn't afford babysitter. So we had this young child, and then it wasn't too long before we had another one on the way. And it was like, okay, this offers us something that we can do. We can invite our friends over, the kids can go to bed, and then we can play TTRPGs. At the time, it was Star Wars. It was always Star Wars. But it's like, this can be a really fun thing we can do, social thing. And then what would happen is we would end up playing TTRPGs, and then we would all hook up our Xboxes and play Xbox. And so these nights, we ended up doing this 2-3 nights a week, and they became like just friend nights. We had like especially two really close friends, two of our closest friends. We basically say, hey, you guys want to play Star Wars tonight? And what that meant was everyone was coming over. They were bringing all of their Star Wars stuff. They were bringing all of their video game stuff, and we were going to play Star Wars for a couple hours, and then we were all going to play video games for a couple hours. And at the time, my wife and I were really into video games, and we, in the earlier days, we like split screened Halo and played online together. But then later on, we each had our own Xbox, and so we would just play. We were pretty serious about Xbox at the time, so. This was like this was our social outlet. This was like what we did for fun. And it became a really, really important part of our lives. And it became a really important part of my life. It got to a point where a lot of my social interaction was built on tabletop gaming and video gaming. They were very similarly ranked in terms of importance in my life. And I think that for a lot of people, especially when people reach a point where they're not wanting to like go out and spend a bunch of money. They're not wanting to go out and party. Although D&D running TTRPGs can end up being like a party thing. My ex-wife and I, we did do that for a little while. The mother I had children with, we are not together anymore. We still co-parent. And that had nothing to do with gaming. It's like gaming was a totally separate thing. But it was like we didn't want to spend the money to go out and party. We didn't want to spend the money to go out. We couldn't afford babysitter. Also, wanted to have a social life. We were young adults, young parents, wanting to do things. We were like, we don't want to just sit at home by ourselves all the time. We don't want to just be like isolated. What can we do? And so gaming became a really important part of it. And it wasn't just tabletop gaming. It was also playing video games and even playing board games to some extent. But what really became I mean, one of the biggest things was in my mid to later 20s, we started playing D&D. And that's when we started getting a bunch of friends. This was a little later on in our lives. Our kids were getting a little older, and it was a lot easier for us to have company over. You know, when we had little kids, like babies, it was harder to have company over because there was a lot to do with the kids. But as the kids got a little older, it became easier to have a lot of people over. And so we would have people over. And so D&D became a very cornerstone part of our entire social life. And for a long time, we gamed on Saturdays and Mondays very religiously. I worked from home as a content writer at the time, digital marketing content writer. So I had a flexible schedule. So I could game on Monday nights late and then sleep in on Tuesday and then just work on my own schedule. So that's what we did to Saturday nights and Monday nights. We were very serious about gaming, very serious. We had a group of, our parties would consist of anywhere from 6 to 14 people. We kind of had a rotating door. We would invite people in, but we did have a core group of like 6 players who were there every single time the doors were open, Saturdays and Mondays. And so we ran this, really long-term campaign and just had a lot of really good times. And it evolved into very close friendships around the table, forged around the table that stretched into all kinds of areas of life. And it was a thing that we could invite people to when we wanted to get to know them. It was a thing we could offer people, be like, hey, you can come game with us. This would be so much fun. We cook dinner. We have games. You don't even have to know how to play. You can just show up and we'll help you. There's all kinds of people who know how to play. And it was a very fun, inviting atmosphere, but we were very serious about the game in the sense that the story and the characters were very sacred to us. And there was a reverence about it. And so I thought that this was such a good thing. And so this became so important to me in my life, so crucially important. It was almost like our whole lives were built around Saturdays and Mondays when we would game. Now, when we started getting a little older, more things started happening. We ended up, our marriage ending up kind of, let's say, going in different directions. We ended up going in different directions as people, and the marriage did end up ending, and we ended up going our separate ways. I ended up taking a small break from D&D tabletop gaming. I actually completely stopped playing video games. And to be really honest, with the exception of playing a little bit of League of Legends now and then, I don't really, to this day, I have not picked back up video games because I just haven't had time. And to me, video games weren't important enough to get a spot in my life, really, like a high-ranked spot. But TTRPGs continued on. It was a little bit hit and miss because as divorces tend to do, they split friend groups. And so our friend group kind of got split in half when that happened. And so it got a little bit weird for a while. And I tried to kind of run some games and it didn't really work out super well. Also because I was in life transition. Ended up getting to a point in life where things were kind of more stable, moving in a good, stable direction. And gaming came back into my life. But this was a period of time where I think I was kind of trying to rediscover and reinvent myself a little bit. And so in some ways, my games got a lot better. They got edgier. They got deeper. They got more gritty, I would say. They got more, there were fewer restrictions, I would say. And some of the most fun, some of the wildest, some of the best gaming times I've had in my life occurred during this kind of period of time. This would have been in my very early 30s and up into the mid 30s. And this was such a wild time. And so some of the gameplay was so good, but at the same time, I started to realize something. I started to realize that I was struggling with friendships and relationships at this time. And part of this was because I had gone through divorce, and there was a part of me that was angry and distrusting and jaded after that experience. And so this led to some kind of weird friendships that went through difficult times. So I was gaming, and it was a pretty important part of my life. I really put a lot of energy into it. I actually put a lot of energy into it. Also, my oldest kid was old enough now to join our games for the first time. And this was such a very cool experience. And I enjoyed so much getting to game with my kid. With that being said, the group I was gaming with was sort of separated into two kind of weird groups of people. At this time, the size of the group ranged from like 6 to 9-ish players or so. But there were some people at the table who I was dear friends with, like lifelong friends with, people I had been gaming with before. And of course, my kid was there. And then there were half people here who were like newcomers. And I will admit that at this time in my life, I struggled with gaming with newcomers. It would start off really good, but then I think that I had trauma from my divorce that led to me kind of like keeping people at a distance. And so it got a little bit weird sometimes gaming with people, I will admit. When you game with people a lot, there's a really good tendency to become friends with them. And this was difficult for me. And I will admit that I went through some rough interpersonal stuff during this time. And I even, I would say, maybe kind of put the self sabotage on some of my relationships with people I was gaming with. And I probably dealt with things sometimes, those conflicts I probably dealt with in not a very good way. So this was a period of kind of like trying to figure out what gaming looked like for the next period of my life. And so, but I was getting older. I was in my mid 30s at this point, younger to mid 30s. And at this point in my life, gaming was a thing that I loved to do very much, but I was starting to realize that there were other things that were beginning to become more important to me than gaming. And I was beginning to take things like business a lot more seriously. I was beginning to take things like fitness and health a lot more seriously. So I was working out at the gym. I was starting to get a lot more serious, put way more effort into my business. I was taking these types of things a lot more seriously. And so gaming started to drift into this kind of like a strange, relatively uncomfortable place where I was gaming and it was an important part of my life, but then it almost started to become a part of my life that stressed me out more than it added to my life. When I was 24, I would just relish spending an afternoon sitting at the kitchen table while my wife, was basically, cooking food for D&D night. It was Saturday afternoon. It was going to be about 2 hours before our friends got here. And I would get all my D&D stuff and begin basically setting up for the session. And I had like everyone's XP written down and I would take notes for all the players. And I loved this. This was what I lived for. Like I loved sitting down on Saturday and getting started with D&D stuff. It was so much fun and it brought so much joy to my life. But by the time I was 34, I was one divorce in. I had gone through a bit of a transformation in my life. I was making more money. However, I realized that I wanted to do better for myself. Back in those early days, when I was like 24, I wasn't making anything for money. I was not taking my business seriously at all. Though I was self-employed, I was just operating at a fraction of what I should have been operating at. And so these things started to weigh on my shoulders to the point where when I was 34 and I sat down at the game table, I would immediately start to feel this anxiety and this stress. Why was I stressed out? I came to realize it was because I thought to myself, I could be and should be working right now instead of doing this. For the next 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, I'm going to be gaming with friends. And yes, I do want to do it. I love games, but at the same time, I'm so stressed out because I feel like I need to work right now. I feel like I need to be at the gym right now. I was in a place in life where I felt like I had to be grinding toward a different life than I was currently living, especially making money and especially with fitness. And these are not necessarily bad things. But gaming ended up actually becoming so this is what gaming become. Gaming had become an old, falling apart, dilapidated community cornerstone for me. It was sort of like a community building in my life that had not been maintained in years. It wasn't getting any budget. Nobody was taking care of it. And even though I had spent some good time putting energy into gaming in my early 30s that resulted in some great games, I was slowly moving toward a place where gaming was starting to become a bigger stressor on me. Maintaining that building was beginning to be a bigger stressor than the payout and the rewards and the joy of the gaming itself. And this led to me getting more and more stressed out and anxious on game days, not because of the game, but because I was still in this point where I think there was like some seeking stability in the aftermath of my divorce and in the aftermath of realizing I wanted to do better for myself in business. These things started to really weigh heavily on my shoulders. And this led to me having a bit of a, like, I would say, an event. I had kind of like a personal event, like an anxiety attack type of event in my late 30s. About, I think I would have been like 36 or so. This would have been like 2 years ago. Now, gaming was not at the center of this. At the center of this was actually a couple things. Number one, increasing business success, which is a very good thing, right? Very good. I was having a lot more success in that area. And so things like money were becoming less and less an issue. But I was in another long-term relationship. The long-term relationship I had gotten into after my marriage was now, I was about 4 years into it. And this marriage, or not this marriage, we weren't married. This was a girlfriend, but we did live together. This relationship was starting to fall apart. As it turned out, I had learned some lessons about how to be a better partner after my divorce, but not enough. And while it wasn't all my fault, this relationship was falling apart, this 4 year relationship, this post divorce relationship I was in. And so there was that. And there was the stress of wanting to get my life on track. And there was the stress of life changes, many life changes. And then there was also gaming. And at the time, this is what gaming was like. This was the apex of stress. Every game day, and even the night before, I would just think to myself, I kind of wish I could just cancel gaming tomorrow because I have so much to do. I have to work. This relationship is looking like it's probably going to fall apart here. I really feel like I need to be working. And I think in a lot of ways for me, work is an anxiety response sometimes to like problems in my life. Sometimes in my life when things don't seem to be going right, I think to myself, well, I'm just going to work more and I'm going to work out more. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to work on the business and I'm going to work on my fitness, because as long as those two areas get good attention, things can only go so wrong. I'll be able to get back on top of the other problems as long as I keep those two things together. And this is not a bad way to think, I don't think. However, what it meant was that I reached a point where I was like, I have to be done with gaming. And so I canceled my game. And I actually did it in a way that I kind of regret. I kind of just sent a message to everyone over Facebook. We had a Facebook group. And I was like, I'm really sorry. I'm going through things in my life and I have to stop gaming. Effective immediately. I sort of just like broke up cold with everyone who I was gaming with at the time. And they understood and they were super gracious about it. However, this marked a period of about probably, I'd say, a year where I did no gaming, no tabletop role play at all. I also forgot to mention, along with video games and tabletop role playing, I had been kind of into Magic the Gathering, pretty fun game. A lot of times, like kind of after video games started to take a back seat, Magic the Gathering kind of filled that role. So when I was playing D&D in my mid to later 20s and early 30s, a lot of times we would play D&D and then we'd play Magic the Gathering. And there was a long period of time where I had 2 game nights a week. I had a D&D night and then I had a Magic the Gathering night. And the same thing happened with Magic the Gathering. I ended up just stopping. I put all my cards in the corner and I even thought about selling them. I didn't, and I'm so glad that I didn't. But I thought about selling my whole collection and just bouncing on the whole hobby, thinking I just have to work. I just have to be in the gym. So gaming for me at that point became something that, while inherently was something I enjoyed, it was something that my life, being in the stressful point it was in and me being in the place mentally I was in, it became something that became unsustainable. And so I had to stop. Now, with that being said, let's fast forward a bit to, mid 30s and onward. So, and my timing is probably a little bit off here, but after that relationship ended, I spent a year basically, I reorganized my house. I cleaned out my house. I got a cat, Peanut. I don't know if you've seen Peanut. She has been on she's been on the show a couple times, but I got a cat. I really, really invested time into my kids. That became something that like it's always been meaningful, but it became so much more meaningful to me. And I think it's because I was working at home. I had a cat. I kind of stopped going out. I was just at home. I was dating, but I was at home. I was working. I would work out, and that was it. That was my life. And it was I spent quite a bit of time alone after that relationship ended, which was also the time that I stopped playing games altogether. No more Magic, no more D&D, really, nothing like that. I even stopped talking to the friends I had been gaming with, not because I was mad at them or anything, but because I just had an event like a maybe you might call it a nervous breakdown, but that's what I did. And so the result was I spent like a year just alone in my house with my cat, worked from home, go to the gym, go shopping, go running, sometimes go to business networking meetings and a date, like I would date. And that was pretty much it. So at this point, if you are still watching this video, there's a question of GM Philosopher, why are you talking about this? I think that the reason I'm sharing this is because I'm giving some perspective at the role games can fill in our life and the role that D&D can play in our life. And I'm going to finish the story here. Basically, ended up getting married. Again, was dating, met someone, dated for it was quite a while. Ended up getting married. Just got married like less than a year ago. Haven't even had my 1 year anniversary yet. But when I met this person, we ended up dating for a while, and life started to get a lot more consistent and normal. And I think that the reason for that was because I was hitting a stride with my work, and there was a sort of like shared desire for like a life that was kind of like peaceful and quiet and where we work, and then we have our home life, and we just have like this happy fun life. Not a whole lot of going out or going places or really anything like that. A lot of just like kind of being at home and making home nice. And so this led to me wanting to get back into gaming. And I noticed that once my work life kind of started to sort itself out, and once I kind of came to terms with the ending of my previous relationship, and that kind of ran its course, I came back into a place of wanting to play games. And I think that I remembered and really enjoyed all the memories I'd made gaming before, and it made me want to get back into it. And I think that being in the new relationship I was in, and having the new chance, to have that peaceful life where you could game and there could be like stability and there could be all these good positive things. This was a really, really attractive thing to me. And so I started dipping a toe back into playing D&D. I started up a game every other week, which has now been going on for not quite even a year, not even a year yet. And I also started this YouTube channel. And the reason that I wanted to get back into gaming also was because of my friends. And I invited some of my friends, and I met and invited and played with some new people. And it still is a thing that sometimes can a little bit stress me out. And I try to get ahead of that by reminding myself that things are going to be all right. Like I think that I have some just residual anxiety from my past life and kind of like not feeling like things are secure enough to be able to play games. I guess I've always been the type who, rather than trying to distract myself from problems, I work and go to the gym to solve problems. And so gaming has always gotten booted out during the times of my life when things got difficult, like the most difficult. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that two very significant relationships in my life ending also coincided with breaks from playing D&D and TTRPGs, and also Magic the Gathering and other games. So where we arrive at is this. I'm now 38 years old. I play D&D every other weekend. I really look forward to these games. I've also started playing with a Discord group online. We play it's like every other weekend, kind of. Sometimes it's every 3 weeks. That is really fun, really fun. And I think that where I'm at with gaming is this. Gaming has become something that is a cornerstone pillar of community in my life, but even more than that, I think it's become an artistic expression that I have learned to treat as an artistic expression now. I think that I went a long time without treating it like an artistic expression. I kind of treated it as like entertaining guests, and I treated it as there's the skill of being a game master, making the game fun for the players. But I also think that I didn't do enough appreciating of the art we were creating. And the art was like kind of, I didn't even think of it as art. I just thought of it as fun, but it is art. And I think that I have a new appreciation for that art now, and how a game well played and well enjoyed is actually more valuable than just the time you spent on it, because it pays dividends in memories that are positive and that make you laugh and that you can share with friends. And so I also feel like my relationships and friendships with people, and me wanting to be a good person, and me wanting to be a positive influence and be a positive part of people's lives, takes precedence over the game. Like, I would much rather have fun and be positive and interact nicely with people, rather than having some kind of conflict. I would much rather be friends with people than to be more serious about the game. And that wasn't necessarily true for some of my gaming, like especially back in my younger to mid 30s, I was a lot more serious about the game than I am now. Not that I'm not serious about it now, but I prioritize the relationships higher than the game now. Whereas back then, it might be true that I prioritized the game, the quality of the game over the relationships, in the sense that if you didn't make the cut, I might stop gaming with you. And then I might not even be friends with you, not because I'm trying to cut you out of my life, but because you're not getting invited back to gaming. And that's my primary social outlet. And I think that I've come to a point where I'm not so intense about it in my older age, being 38. And sometimes I get comments from people that remind me of stuff I might say when I was a little bit younger, kind of like really intense comments, or comments like talking down about maybe the way that I do things, or talking down about the way some people enjoy games, if it's not the same way that the commenter enjoys games. And I've realized that there's all kinds of people, and they all love to enjoy games in a different way. And I guess at the end of the day, the reason I wanted to tell the story was, I guess, partly because it was weighing on my mind, and partly because I wanted to kind of explain that I think that gaming is what we make it, and that it can be such a fun and happy thing. And we should let other people enjoy games how they want to enjoy games. And we should just be good people and let people enjoy games the way they want to. And we should find good gamers who love to game like we do. And this is an amazing thing to find that compatibility. And that we should value this time spent with friends. We should value this community time spent together. We shouldn't take the games so seriously that they hurt our relationships with others or hurt our own well-being, but we should take them seriously enough that they get a priority place in our life if we're going to engage in them. I think if we're going to engage in games like D&D, we have to make them at least an item on our priority list, so that we can do this prep work and we give time to it and we place value on it. And for me, intentionally doing this has been an important part of getting back into gaming and making it the fun thing that it can be. So anyway, I hope that this video has been interesting or useful. I know that this is kind of a long ramble, but anyway, those are just some stories from me about my life playing games, and shabam, there you go. There you have it. And that's going to conclude this episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. Hey, thank you all for coming back and watching another one of my videos. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. I'm here every single day creating videos about the best game in the world, D&D. So I will see all you awesome people on the next one.